Good afternoon.
Okay.
Mr. Stevens,
Yes, sir.
this is Fernando. I probably know you from the Paiso forums of Fecha, but Fernando is my name, and it's a giant pleasure to meet you, honestly.
I'm very glad to hear you. I've enjoyed communicating with you online.
Thank you very much. Thank you also for all the stuff that you've been putting out. You really have improved our gaming experience greatly.
Well, I'm glad what I do is able to help people have fun. That's the main drive to do it.
Fair enough. All right, I don't want to take that much of your time, so I'm going to ask you a few questions for our little group, and I trust that my friend forwarded you the questions a couple days ago, right?
Yes, I have them right here.
Okay. Should we start? One second, please. All right. First of all, for those who are not familiar with your work, could you mention some of the projects that you have been on, people that you have worked with, so they can understand a bit better your level of experience when it comes to the industry?
Absolutely. I originally started writing for role-playing games in the 1990s. I wrote a fair number of articles for Dragon magazine, covering such things as second edition Dungeons & Dragons and the Alterity system when that came out. Back in 2000, I became a full-time employee of Wizards of the Coast for a little while and worked on 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons and the D20 Star Wars role-playing game. In 2001, I left Wizards of the Coast and became a freelance game designer. I worked on the tabletop RPG version of the EverQuest role-playing game. I worked on the Black Company role-playing game based on the books of Glenn Cook. I continued to work on Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition and 3.5. I worked on D20 Modern, and later in that decade, just a few years ago, I was one of the 3 core designers of the Star Wars Saga D20 edition. So I've got a broad range of experience with the D20 system in general and role-playing overall. And then when the Pathfinder role-playing game came out, I was very excited by what Paizo had done with the D20 engine, and got together with some friends of mine to work for Super Genius Games, producing short support products for Pathfinder under the banner mostly of Genius Guides. So we've been putting out a Genius Guide to some subject basically every week for the past 14 months.
Oh, well, that's a very impressive resume. I must confess that I didn't know you have been doing all that. I'm quite impressed with that. On that note, a really quick question. How do you come up with the idea to make a small PDF every week? I mean, it's something that I hadn't seen before I saw your company.
That's a fair question, and some of it is that I play role-playing games every week. I know a lot of game designers, in fact, do design for games they don't play, and I'm impressed with the ability to do that. If I'm designing regularly for a game, I have to be playing that game. I have a group of friends, some of them I've been playing with for more than 20 years. I've been playing with my wife for that long, for example. And we will gather and we will run campaigns. Sometimes I'm the game master, sometimes I'm a player. And a lot of the ideas come from comments that people say around the table. I have a little notebook with me, and if somebody says, gee, I wish that I had more spells for this character that were winter-based, because I see this character as a very ice-based spellcaster, for example, I can say, okay, well, that's a place where there are currently players that don't have the support they want. I'll write down spells for ice, and then you'll end up with a project like the Genius Guide to Ice Magic. So that's where a lot of the ideas come from. Some of them are ideas that I have had that have built up over the past decade. A lot of my previous work has been for other companies, of course, and they frequently had a very specific idea of what products they wanted. So it would not be unusual if I was writing a book called Dragon Magic for Wizards of the Coast, for example, for me to think, wouldn't it be cool if there was a character that could ride on dragons? And I would propose that idea to people at Wizards of the Coast, and they might think, for whatever reason, that's not a good match for their product. Well, I don't ever let an idea go to waste, so if I have an idea that can't work for one project, I'll write it down. I literally have a file just marked ideas on my computer, and I will periodically go back and I'll look at those, and I'll say, is this something that was in fact a bad idea? Because I'm not perfect. Sometimes I have terrible ideas. Or is this just something that didn't match what they needed, and now that I am the lead developer of this company, is this something that I want to either get a freelancer to produce or write myself? So that's the other major source. And then, of course, I'm very active on the Paizo boards. So sometimes we'll be looking at the Paizo boards, and especially now that we're better known, people sometimes say, we would really enjoy it if you would write a spellcaster that used runes, or we would really enjoy it if you would do a sequel to your Time Thief product so you can do more time magic. And that's another great source of ideas. So, of course, everything we write, we want fans and gamers to be able to use at their tabletop. So having people tell us directly, we would like to see you write this, is something we pay a great deal of attention to.
Oh, wow. On that note, I would like to personally say that Runecaster sounds very, very awesome. I was advocating for that, and when the second Genius Guide to Feats of Runing Might came out this week, I was very giddy on that note. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I saw your comment on that. I mean, the first Runic Might book was very popular, and so we'd been working on a sequel for a while. It sort of came together during one of the playtests, but we finally had enough material to do a book, so we put it out. But that doesn't mean that a Runecaster might not come along. I think it is a strong idea, and if we come up with a mechanic we really like for it, we will certainly produce one.
Awesome, perfect. Well, let me jump to the next question, if you don't mind then. As a game designer, how do you see role-playing communities in small countries like ours? That, is fairly, the hobby is not as well known as in the States. What do you think of us?
Well, I think actually role-playing game groups, especially organized groups such as yourselves, in communities where role-playing games aren't as prevalent, are extremely important for one obvious reason. It is easier to build a market in a place where that market starts small than to try to expand one where it's already very well known. In the United States, we've been actively having role-playing games since the 1970s. And I'm not saying that market can't be grown, but most people who are interested in role-playing games have already had some exposure to it. When you're looking at the possibility of a global market, and one of the advantages of selling electronic products, as we mostly do, is that anyone who can access the Internet can access those. It doesn't matter where in the world they are. So I think it's very important to support groups in places where role-playing game isn't as prevalent, because those groups will have an easier time expanding their market. And, of course, the larger the market is, the more people can enjoy our hobby. That's very important to me. I'm a big booster of expanding the hobby just for people to have fun. But also, realistically, the bigger any market, the more resource there is to do things for it. So the PDFs we've produced are all already available, and anyone who came in even 1 year, 2 year, 5 years down the line who's interested in them can buy them. So expanding the market is a great way for us to get more money, to have more resources to do even larger and more interesting things, which is obviously something that both as a company, we want to turn a profit, but also as a designer, it's fun to have more resources to get more artists on board, to get other game designers on board, to spend more time playtesting and trying out, and even possibly experiment with entirely new ways of doing things. So I'm very supportive of groups in communities that have less of a role-playing game tradition.
Well, you're very right on that one. The hobby has been around here for about 10 years or so. I wouldn't know if it was any longer than that. And Pathfinder it's not that well known around here, but as a group, we're trying our best to make people aware of it. Especially, honestly, whenever we try to promote the Pathfinder role-playing game, we tell them about Paizo, and we tell them about the Super Genius games right next to it as part of the game itself, because honestly, the way we enjoy the game would not be the same without your products. It just wouldn't feel like Pathfinder, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do, and of course that's always great to hear. I'm always very impressed with what the people at Paizo do, and it's one of the reasons anyone writes for role-playing games is because they want to hear people say, yes, we like what you do, it makes our games more fun. So it's a great honor to hear people say that. It's one of the reasons we do this work.
Fair enough. On that note, have you ever actually been to South America? Have you been around here?
Sadly, I've not had the opportunity. The furthest south I've ever managed to go is Mexico. And one of the reasons I say sadly is my family actually has a tradition of spending time in South America. My mother was actually born in the U.S. Embassy in Quito, I believe, in Ecuador.
Oh, in Ecuador.
And I had an uncle who I only got to meet once when he came up to visit, who lives in Ecuador pretty much his entire life. So I have strong ties through my family to areas in South America. I just haven't ever had the opportunity to travel to any of those locations myself.
All right. I'll take it as a possibility to maybe invite you to some convention down here at some point.
I would love to come.
All right. Sounds very, very cool. now that I got out of the way, I was really curious on that specific regard. Were you actually surprised to know that your company, Super Genius Games, had a very avid, though admittedly small, following down here in Peru?
Yes, actually, I was. I'm happy to admit that I was surprised. You tend to write what you know, and I spend a lot of time with gamers from America, and when I'm communicating with other people, I'm most often communicating with people in other primarily English-speaking countries. So I've got friends I know in England and Australia and Canada, obviously. So to be aware that Peru, which is not some place I had focused any of my design effort, had a group that was particularly interested in our work was surprising. It was also delightful. I mean, you always like knowing that people like your work. It's particularly nice when you see that there's a group who are organized about it and seem to really come together on a regular basis and enjoy the hobby as a group. And if a group like that, wherever they are, enjoys your work, you know that you've successfully tapped into something big yourself and are helping to spread the joy of a hobby that, as I said, I'm a big supporter of.
That's very good to know. It feels like we're at least giving you some emotional reward for all the work that you do for us indirectly. And on that note, I just wanted to add that the archetype system that you guys made has allowed us to make a lot of stuff that we would have otherwise not been able to do, specifically when it comes to games inspired in local culture and in pre-Hispanic settings. In using that specific mechanic that you guys created has allowed us to do an infinite amount of random stuff that we would have been able to do otherwise. And I know this interview is a bit short, but I would like to actually let you know about that so you know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think one of the things that Pathfinder did better than some previous versions of the same rules was to have some options for customization of characters and of campaigns, and that's what inspired us to do the whole archetype rule system. And I think it's too easy for game designers, myself included, to think in terms of just Robin Hood and King Arthur. And there's a rich tradition of fantasy and history throughout the world that if you give people the tools that they can customize their campaign to take advantage of some of that, even if we as professional game designers might overlook some of it, at least we give people the opportunity to introduce the elements they're most interested in into their games.
I know what you mean, and again, it's something that we honestly did not expect when we started getting into Pathfinder, and it just started developing, and we saw different products coming out. And the last time I was in the States, I had to get a credit card over there so I could actually start getting all these products that I could see, because it seemed like a bad idea not to start getting into the wagon. It literally has changed things drastically of how we used to game.
Yeah, I totally understand.
Fair enough. Well, as you were saying before, that this is a market that hasn't been tapped. It's a fairly new market. One of the main issues that we have around here when it comes to game designing is the problem of piracy. And you, as a successful independent game designer, what would you have to say to people who ignorantly believe that downloading an illegal PDF really doesn't hurt anyone? What would you have to say to them?
Well, that's a really complicated question, and it's something that much smarter, much more successful people than me are still debating and probably will be well into this century. So to people who actually do the piracy, I would say that you've got to remember that this material, if you're enjoying it, can only exist if the people who are creating it make a profit. This industry has lost some game designers, some very talented people, and some artists for that matter, because there wasn't enough money for them to continue to support the work they were doing, and they moved on to other things. In some cases, those are things like making movies or doing novels. In other cases, they leave the industry entirely and go on to work on farms or in offices or do something where the creativity isn't as necessary, but the money is more stable. So I do think that when you take